A very potential student, if he disclosed or say disclosed in a university that say comes from slum, what it meant is like losing a friend. Okay, a person who does not live in slum was not happy to make someone who comes from slum, though the person was very honest, very nice. So this attached a kind of stigma. Police looked slum as the crime hub, so had police arrested someone from outside of the slum and one from inside the slum, the police spearheaded investigations against the slum boy first, only then someone who was not from the slum. So this stigma actually created a kind of situation of segregation and humanity itself.
Before we enter into the jurisprudence and theories to address poverty, let's see the history and stakeholders who have led us to this distasteful, segregated reality.
Nepal, a country in the lap of Himalayas, has its name derived from the word Ne-Pal, where Ne means war and Pal means a tented house. A country being the production house of war and the trade point in the past is struggling with the production, trade deficit and poverty today. The history of Nepal was and is centered on the Kathmandu Valley, and this has always fostered the capital-centric development, hindering the development prospects in other parts of Nepal. The Kathmandu Valley was the epitome of prosperity and power. From having well-equipped irrigation system to being the strategic bridge between India and Tibet, Kathmandu Valley was central to the trade done via Silk Road. Goods were exported past Nepal, which provided a major free and unrestricted trading route between South Asia and China.
Nepal, India, and China were the firm believer of interdependence and resource sharing. Paper, iron, pottery were the popular exports of Nepal. Prikuti, the princess of Nepal, was married to 33rd king of Tibet, Songtsen Gampo, who helped flourish Buddhist culture in Tibet. The Buddhist scriptures, which were made in Nepal, were exported to China, including dhatu and bronze scriptures. Nepali artisans were sent to Tibet to build temples and palaces, the mark of which are Potala Palace and Jokhang Temple.
The 1950s was the time of drastic change in the governance of Nepal. The Indo-Nepal Treaty of Peace and Friendship, signed between India and Nepal, had a nefarious effect on Nepali politics, with India turned meddler from being a mediator in every political action of Nepal.
Disruption of supply lines, disruption of transit is not acceptable.
After the downfall of Rana regime in 2007 BS, in order to lay the foundation of development and capability enhancement, King Mahendra came up with the idea of flourishing public enterprises.
Despite the subsidies granted by His Majesty government, public enterprises collapsed in Nepal. The reasons were weak market facilitation and infrastructural base, which could not yield results as intended. Liberalization policies in 1990 was adhered to by Nepal. Similarly, India in 1990 was adhering to socialist policies, but faced a sudden economic crisis, which led India to move towards economic liberalization.
However, China was gradually and selectively choosing the liberalization policies unlike India and Nepal. and was having its paradigm shifted to building capability and all-round progress in the nation. There are several flashpoints in the world which were designed by the Western powers.
America was more out of America. America less work within America and work more outside.
In order to fulfill their allies' interests and destabilize others. One of the tactics was to attack on the language of the people. English language was the deliberate gift of the British Raj to India in its implementing its divide and rule policy to disintegrate social harmony in India. Similarly, the effect could be traced in the educational policy introduced in Nepal in 2028 BS, which changed the social curriculum, deplored the cognitive, national, cultural, and linguistic DNA of Nepal. With the notion of globalization, the white superior mentality was introduced and ingrained in the psychology of Indian subcontinent.
The first recession of the 1930s saw fault in the American economic system and policy.
Large number of the population who were affected by this recession or the breakdown, economic breakdown, lost job, lost wealth, and most people who invested their money on housing, it dropped down, and then they had to give up these houses. So 40 million people went down to the poverty line. The trickle down impact would be with all other people down at the grassroots felt, because these people earn, and they inflated their salary in a way like some CEO in a bank in America is having like $6 billion US dollar annual salary. So the failure of the economy in America producing equality is not because it is not producing income, but this economy stopped generating jobs. It's like the capitalism fell to be capitalism. So this capitalism today they have been practicing is not capitalism, but it's a neoliberalism. With increasing liberalism gave access to elite community. So politics totally came to be controlled by Wall Street. Neoliberalism function as a discriminatory system. Discriminatory system in the sense that it get privilege to a very small fraction of the society. So now the gap is too big. So this is what Christopher Hayek says, that America has come to a kind of situation of Jevon paradox. Jevon paradox, what it means is like resources exhausted, institution to generate income are exhausted, and jobs have been exhausted. So it is a big gap today. What is the inequality impact is like America has the largest infantile death rate. The children from poor community doing good in secondary schools, but they are not doing in higher education.
After the formation of the United Nations, it recognized the need of economic deliberation and regulating bodies like Economic and Social Council, World Bank, IMF, and Asian Development Bank.
So American society in the present context is suffering from inequality not because there is no money, there is no wealth, and there is no income. The American society is suffering from the problem of inequality because this wealth and this income is taken to the pocket of only small people.
With Cold War looming the world during 1950s, 70s,
politically, America encountered as a superpower Cold War with Soviet Union. So there was a tough competition between them. In 1992, Soviet Union collapsed, and America believed that it's a failure of the socialist system. So they believed that markets should control the society, markets should control economy, and markets should also control the government. So government should introduce deregulation.
These world economy regulating bodies were based in the USA, Europe, and Japan, who were active advocates of liberalization and capitalism.
Three things are very important. One, international organizations like World Bank, International Monetary Fund, and Asian Development Bank betrayed the people. How they betrayed the people is like they essentially practice a attitude of rent seeking. They not only pocketed income they made, but they also pocketed income of others.
Therefore, IMF and World Bank, without understanding the ground realities of the economy, blatantly applied liberalization policy. The structural adjustment loans were policy alterations which was recommendations made by these economic institutions to the fund receiving country.
What many economists, including Joseph Stiglitz and others in the later part of our era, believe is that the same vigor, the same structure, and same institutions they very carefully and very intelligently address the problem of recession in 1930 are not able to cater for their service to the problem of economic inequality at this time, because these structures have been absolutely hijacked by a small number of elites.
Although today IMF admits excess privatization, market liberalization is damaging the economy, many countries were lured into this pitfall. The effect could be seen in the immediate liberalization of Nepal and India, which culminated problems such as high cost of globalization, environment degradation, corrupt political process, ignored cultural adaptation, massive unemployment, ethnic conflicts, urban violence. The rent-seeking attitude of developing countries on institutions like World Bank and IMF has actually faltered the rule of law and implementation of development strategies in their territories.
The fundamental misconception of modern jurisprudence with regard to system of justice looms around how should we use the system of justice and building capacity of people. With Rawlsian theory of concept of justice, which demanded absolute equality of people as a political precondition of the society, said we should ignore people, we should actually forget people, so we should create a veil. We should not see who is who, and we have to develop the concept. Was a fundamental theory in our time which advocated for egalitarianism but applying metaphysical abstract notion. What it particularly meant is that you should disseminate advantages to the people, but you should never look who they are. You should not know who they are. So if you do that, then the chance of treating people equally is better. But if you know who these people are, for example, American, Japanese, Nepalese, if you already know who these people are, then the biasness starts in the mind. Was a kind of concept he thought about, and therefore he developed a concept of justice through veiling. Ignore who they are, only believe that there are people. So take the cause of justice to them was a fundamental philosophy he talked about. Fundamentally, what we see is like the classical jurisprudence that we have been acquainted with for last many centuries is that it takes law as a abstract concept or system of regulatory mechanism introduced by the system, either way to control the citizens or to distribute benefits, distribute advantages, or distribute rights in equal terms to every citizen. So what the modern jurisprudence is therefore talking about is like, no law and justice can be properly functional if we fail to apply economic analysis or economic interpretation of law. So what does it believe therefore is that a system of law and justice is not a value, is not a concept in itself. It is just an instrument. What we believe is like the resources needs to be distributed on equity basis. Everybody should be able to enjoy entitlements to commodities. So I need to have entitlement to house. I need to own house. I need to be able to buy food. I need to be able to buy my clothing. So that is an access to commodities, that is an access to resources. Why people are failing to have these entitlements to commodities? The simple question is that they have no capability to do it. They cannot hold capability to have entitlements to commodities. The reason is like they are deprived, they are socially excluded, or their access to resource is somehow obstructed or denied or blocked. So question therefore is like, law and justice system works as interface of development. So one of the fundamental objective of the modern jurisprudence or legal science therefore is that we need to analyze the provision of law, we need to analyze the judgment of a court, we need to analyze the broader system of law as an instrument of distributing entitlements to commodities. That means law and justice are instrument of empowering people to have entitlements to commodities. System of law and justice both are not aims, but they are instrument of development. Everybody should be able to enjoy a vector of life with adequate living. That means standard living. No one should be dying from disease. No one should be starving. No one should be living in open sky, and no one should be deprived of jobs to enhance potentiality of individual intellect, individual creativity, and individual productivity. So if we see these three things, productivity, creativity, and intellect, with persistence, without causing harms to the regularity of these concepts like regularity or generality of productivity, that means person's productivity should not be taken away. Persons should be always encouraged to have more productivity as a kind of thing. So persistence is also a very important concept. So system of law should provide access to every individual to develop his or her intellect. System of law should also enhance possibility or potentiality of individuals to develop creativity. So person should be able to learn more new things, more new technology, and more new ideas. Persons should also be able to enhance the productivity, which actually transforms individual's life from this stage to a better stage, which is called a vector of life with adequate living. So question, what does economic analysis of law requires for each? A law should always be audited, or law should always be seen from the perspective how much the system of law in a given country is able to embody or incorporate post rights, okay, the rights to complete protection of individuals' integrity.
We always thought justice is an outcome of law, but never thought about injustice, which made the concept of justice very abstract. The first five rights theory rejects the prevailing theory of assimilation theory and a critical realist theory of justice, both of which fundamentally dealt with the notion of justice, but not with the objective realities of the justice.
Professor Dr. Yubaraj Sangroula advocates for first five rights, which believes in enhancing capabilities.
That something what is called poverty does not exist, because poverty is a shadow of deprivation. As being a shadow of deprivation, if you concentrate on poverty, either in terms of elevation or in terms of reduction, you will be playing with shadow, and you cannot do it because there is no possibility of removing shadow. What you can remove is the object. If you remove the object, you can remove the shadow. If you remove the deprivation, you can remove the state of poverty. But the entire concept of justice right now is concentrated on empowering individual to remove this shadow, therefore hijacking attention from focusing on objective deprivations to shadowy pain. So there are two aspects. One, economic vector of life, another is political vector of life. So all rights that are related to the political vector of life are called output or advance rights, whereas all those rights related to my basic needs related vector of lives are called source or foundational rights. So these two rights work in complementarity. First, the foundational rights create a position of person to enjoy capability through promotion of productivity, whereas the advance and output rights lead people to living in a state of happiness where individual's liberty and autonomy becomes very important. So
Dr. Yubaraj Sangroula accepts capability is a precondition, but he suggests Amartya Sen is silent on what creates the capability. According to him, these first five rights constitutes a precondition of capability and isn't possible to be created without development threshold.
Complete recognition and protection of oath of human person. Then comes the freedom of choice. Persons in freedom of choice regarding professions, regarding ideology, regarding the orientation of survival or living are very, very important. With these three basic rights, no person can be a person. But these three very important rights depend on person's capacity to understand, person's capacity to obtain information, that means knowledge, and person's capacity to participate in economic generation. So these five rights, therefore, are fundamental rights. These five rights are very essential rights. These five rights create a kind of threshold. So person living with complete recognition and protection of these five rights, which are defined as first rights, is living at the threshold of the development. That means the person is now in cockpit to fly for the better vector with adequate life or adequate living or adequate standard. So according to this theory, what we therefore we believe is that no law and justice can be properly interpreted if we don't apply economic analysis of the system. So economic analysis therefore calls for treating law and development as interface. Development is a goal and law is an instrument. So law works with the values. There are certain values that I said these are the five rights. These five rights also provide a value. So justice should always be reinforcing these values in law. So one law should be treated as legitimate if it incorporates these rights within it. If a law fails to incorporate these rights within it, then the law should be defined as a draconian law or the law should be defined as an authoritarian or despotic or useless, meaningless law. So it relates development with system of law is that a system of law should enhance development. And how does the system of law enhance development? Is empowering people to enjoy 5 basic rights. Because what does it believe is like once a person has a threshold level of development, it is the responsibility of individuals to define what is his or happiness.
Amartya Sen refused the vitality of John Rawls' concept of justice and suggested building capability as a precondition for individuals to enjoy rights.
About. But Amartya Sen later on said that no, that's not a good way, because if you ignore people, then what you ignore is not the face of the people, metaphorically speaking. What you exactly ignore is the objectivity. If you don't know what is the cause of poverty in a society, how do you make the law? Is his thrust, though he said that the vast poverty taking life of many people, forcing people to go to bed without food, or people dying without medicine, is not an imagination, but it is a fact. What Amartya Sen said is like, most people are not dying because they don't have means. Most people are dying because they have no capability. They have no entitlement. Like there is a land, vast land in the earth, but people cannot occupy this land. Because to occupy this land, what they need is the entitlement. This entitlement refers to ownership. You need to create an ownership to the resources. And people are not able to create their ownership because they are ignorant, they are uneducated, and they have no capability. So he brought the concept of justice more to the objective line. Now, when we landed concept of injustice to be removed, concept of the state of injustice to be removed, or the state of injustice to be addressed, we apply different varieties of theories regarding justice. The first theory about 50 years before use was the assimilation theory. Most Latin American people in America, what they thought is like the best way of addressing big gap of inequality between white and Hispanic population is to transform all Hispanics into mainstream. So if we put them into mainstream, so they behave like mainstream, therefore inequality is gone. So if there is a deprived community and there is a privileged community, what assimilation theory says that end those deprivation and bring these people to the privileged community. But this theory failed miserably because people do not live only with economic, people also live with culture. So bringing one community into another community feels insecure of loss of culture. So the gap becomes further bigger. So this theory failed to work. Largely, this theory was inspired by Rawlsian theory of not objective identification of people. When we say people, all people are same people. So this theory failed very miserably. It didn't work in United States. It also did not work in Europe and other parts of the world. Then next theory concept was the critical theory. What critical theory said is like you have to distinctly identify one group and another group, and you have to give all those conditions available for privileged community to also to the deprived community. And this theory basically called for two separate identity. So the identity-based theory actually was a product of this critical theory. Several mixed theories were practiced, they also failed. Miserably, what they failed is like addressing problem of bigger slums in Asia, like city like Dhaka, Bombay, Calcutta, now Kathmandu also emerging as a very prime city of having slum population. And this state of life that people live in slum was defined something called subordination. It was defined as subordination to distinguish it from the state of discrimination. Until then, discrimination and subordinations were interchangeably understood. But subordination theory was brought about to distinguish the state of subordination from discrimination. And what certain theories emerged was like discrimination basically is an outcome of law. There is a law, but two people have been treated differently is a condition of discrimination. Okay, a woman has done master degree in law, and a man has done master degree in law. A university advertises for lecturership, but the university management considers that since the woman is a married woman and already pregnant, will be having baby, so will not be having enough time to spend in the university. So though she has 84%, but it is better to have a man with 80%. This is discrimination. But the subordination is the subordination is an outcome not of practice of law, but the practice of policy in itself. So condition of condition of person living in desolate poverty, and a condition of person living without poverty is what is basically called the issue of subordination. So you're living without electricity, you're living without water system, you're living without better road, and you're living everything, all the basic needs of the human life. So that's not a failure of law, that's a failure of the state policy. So what we say from this point is like somebody living below the threshold condition is a condition of subordination. So what they said therefore is like we need to address this condition differently, not by law but by the policy. And this is where the many concept of reservation, priority and other theory came, but they didn't also work perfectly.
While the anti-deprivation theory is developed to realize the justice through removal of condition of injustice.
So now what do we talk is like anti-deprivation development threshold theory. What anti-deprivation development threshold theory talks about is not a particular individual but the surrounding. If you do not demolish slums, keeping people within the slum, you cannot treat them equally, because the concept is that good people do not live in slum is a kind of concept. So question is not giving equal treatment to the people inside the slum or between outside city and the slum city, but the question is like not to keep the slum itself is what is the development and how it can be therefore done is like creating a development threshold. So this theory does not work alone. The threshold development threshold theory does have concept but does not have exact instrument to get it out. So here comes another theory to work together with development threshold theory is objectively functional development. What is objectively functional development is that if you build infrastructure, if you build energy, if you build a school, if you build market and health services, and you provide access to the people, all people enjoy these services in equal terms. So therefore, what this theory therefore says is like, do not give money to the people, rather give big roads. Do not give money to the people, rather you need to give a workable market. You need not give education to read and write. What you need to give education in terms of enhancing productivity. Therefore, person is able in the market to buy and sell. So, development threshold theory, together with objectively functional development theory, think that every person is potential of development. Every person is potential of enhancing his or her productivity, because state cannot define what is happiness for you. State can only define what is your basic threshold of development. That means state should give all the basic needs to you so that you define what kind of happiness that you live in. Some people may choose 5 rooms building. Someone probably will be happy to living in a tent, and someone probably wants to marry and someone do not. Someone probably wants to eat food at the house, someone probably at hotel. So that is what is autonomy. So therefore development is the end, law and justice are the instruments. What threshold theory therefore says is like, justice is not an abstract concept, it is an objective reality. So what we therefore say is like, do not think of justice, think of injustice. Injustice is an objective reality, but justice only is concept. If we understand justice in terms of injustice, if we understand poverty in terms of deprivation, and if we understand deprivation in terms of my hardship, or my objective hardship of life, we can make law functional. Therefore, end of law, if we say injustice is wrong, but if we say end of law is to remove injustice, then we are correct. So what therefore we can say is that both law and justice as instrument work to ensure better vector of life. A better vector of life means a vector of life with adequate living, adequate standard of living, and that is what is called development. Therefore, both law and justice and development form an interface. So this is what the modern jurisprudence discusses about. Only this way we can address the inequality that we discussed before, the inequality of wealth, inequality of income, and inequality in terms of job can be addressed only by this approach of jurisprudence. Analysis of law applying economics, building threshold with 5 rights, and thus making law work in interface with development.